Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Koviki Talk. Koviki Talk is a multi-episode broadcast series where we talk about COVID-19 from all angles. We're timely, so if it's in the middle of the census, we're going to talk about COVID-19 in relation to registering for the census. If it's time to vote, then we would talk about voting safely, but it's for Pacific Islanders by Pacific Islanders. So today we have the Inland Empire team. We're making our rounds around the country. We've been to LA, we've been to let's see, San Diego, and now we're in the Inland Empire. So our guests today, our panel today, I'm going to start with Asena Utuone Filihia. She's a mother of three children, married, and the daughter of Utuone Tui Kolovatu and Makaleta Fili Moihala Utuone. She is a scholar practitioner advocating for Pacific Islanders and currently serves on the Director of Development as the Director of Development with MALO, that is Motivating Action Leadership Opportunity, a nonprofit organization serving the Tongan and broader NHPI community within the Inland Empire. She also holds a position as Assistant Director of the Asian American Resource Center at Pomona College. Her office and AARC interns work in collaboration with MALO to host a Saturday Tongan education program called STEP. She and Malo have been blessed to work with the IE COVID response team to build upon partnerships to support local families. She holds an AA in liberal studies from LA Valley College, a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Studies from Cal State Northridge, and a master's degree in education from UCLA. Asena is deeply committed to culturally informed efforts that improve the quality of life, health, and access for residents in the region, and especially among NHPI communities. Welcome, Asena.
Hello, Lily, Carl. Thank you for having us.
Glad to be here with you this evening. Next, we have David Utuone. David is a gay Samoan NHPI community organizer advocate based in San Bernardino, California, doing work as the community health liaison for the Young Samoa, that stands for Serving All Mankind Our Alofa. Through his work in the Young Samoa, David has tried to combine his professional experience of over a decade in managed healthcare with health plan organizations that offer free and affordable health coverage through the ACA to low-income populations and communities of color in LA, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties. With his lived experience as a Pacific Islander living with HIV to create local safe spaces for NHPIs in the Inland Empire to have meaningful, educational, and transparent discussions about sexual health, mental wellness, and offer out to the IE NHPI community accessible resources to free and or affordable healthcare coverage. He sits on the California Planning Group for the California Department of Public Health's Office of AIDS, HIV, and Hepatitis C Harm Reduction Committee, where he pushes for better NHPI inclusivity in state discussions related to resource allocations that support individuals and agencies doing HIV data collection, education, prevention, and treatment work. He considers his IE PICRT peers family and has gained so much valuable wisdom from each of them. Welcome, David.
Hi, thank you for having me.
What an amazing group. And last, we have Francine Cepeda Blacksher. Francine is a Chamorro and Chicana educator with a passion and purpose to honor her ancestors and the way she lives today. She is a life partner to Anthony and a mother of two warrior queens who inspire her daily. I love that description. As an educator, she uses her platform to teach, inform, and make space in the educational system for her fellow Pacific Islander scholars and families. After 10 years of impactful teaching and advocacy in the classroom setting, Francine was determined to reach further with scholars and educators by becoming a program specialist. She is now coaching, training, and providing feedback for educators to grow. Her purpose has always been to speak, act, and make positive impacts on our youth and the community around them. In 2017, she became the founder of Island Grad, a Pacific Islander graduate recognition ceremony where she has created an intentional space to unify, celebrate, and honor our Pacific Islander graduates, and a graduation made for them and their families to share in their accomplishments and walk in their life's purpose. Welcome, Francine.
Thank you. I'm blessed to be here with my brother and sister over here.
What an amazing group. So the question usually that we'll ask, because we're going around the country really by region, up in the Northwest, in San Diego, Southern California, which really would include the Inland Empire, but it's such a big area, and we talked about that with that group. It's such a big area that there's more guidance and leadership needed. We would normally ask them, "What's your favorite part about living in the region?" But it being um, International Women's History Day, I thought we'd change that up a little bit and ask maybe about a Pacific Islander woman that has influenced you or that you admire, or you admire their body of work. I kind of jumped down the rabbit hole today and really just looked back at all the different big influences of Polynesian women, and I just picked Bernice Pauahi Bishop. Princess Pauahi is one of Hawaii's most important philanthropists in the nation, in the country. As an ali'i, and that's the last descendant of the Kamehameha line, she holds the private land ownership, the largest private land ownership in the islands, owning approximately 9% of Hawaii's total acreage across the island chain. And this I've really found striking to me. During her lifetime, she saw the Native Hawaiian population dwindle from 124,000 to 44,000. Concerned for her people, she focused her entire estate towards education. So in 1887, her will designated that the Kamehameha schools be created to have educational opportunities to preserve and perpetuate the well-being of Native Hawaiians. And today, that Bishop estate is worth above $10 billion. So very well put together, business-minded, saw the need for education, and really put some things into place that have changed the lives of Pacific Islanders, Hawaiians in perspective for generations to come. So when I look back and I say, hey, is there a woman or a Pacific Islander woman that I really admire their body of work, or that I've read about, that was who I picked today. There's so many different ones to pick. There's some people on this right now and we said this to the same group, the ladies we had last week. So I guess I'll just throw that out there. I'll start at the top of my screen. Francine, is there anybody that sticks out in your mind when we kind of throw that question out there?
When you started speaking about just any women in our Oceania realm of even the IE, I was thinking of so many people, and especially because I have roots here in the IE and in San Diego. But out of respects of where I am now, I will say there's two in particular that I really want to honor, and that's Ati Sala, who is a counselor at Cajon High School here in San Bernardino, who has given her life countlessly to many of our Pacific Islander youth, from the school to the home to college. And she's been a major integral part of me even just entering into the school system with the nonprofit that I have created. And she's about to retire after doing this work for over 20 years. And I mean, I just can't give no more love than she has just changed my life and many, many, many lives of the scholars that I work with and their families and their generations before them. And then the other one I have to, really take the time to recognize is Auntie Rose Beaumentre. She is now assistant superintendent in Ontario. She is phenomenal in the work of mental health with Pacific Islanders. She taught me about the importance of really synergizing our Pacific Islander youth and doing that in a safe space, but also in a way that is for our kids and our youth and our people. So she's pushed me in many ways as a leader and just really step out on faith. So both of those are the two that I think about just locally here in an empire that have impacted my life and even my daughter's lives and many of the lives around us here.
I think that when you have people that are really doing heart work in the community, there are ripple effects that they change lives that sometimes they don't even know how far their reach goes. So I think it's important to call out, you have big names in Pacific Islander history, right? But to call out the people that maybe that aren't in a history book and let them know how important their work is and how life-changing it is. I mean, it never is the wrong time to call that out. So I appreciate that, Francine.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you.
Asena, we're going to go to you. David, if they're going to pick all the inland empire, you maybe have to dig a little bit, but there's plenty to choose from. So Asena, how about you? Is there somebody that comes to mind as we bring up this topic?
For sure, Carl. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think similar to Francine, I want to acknowledge first that we are here in the land of the Tongva, out here in the Inland Empire, parts of it where I'm from right now. But yeah, I can't say enough about the matriarchs that we whose, I would say, shade we sit under uh, as women who have really planted seeds and now I would say flourishing programs and things that we now have for our community that we didn't have when we were children. One of those people that I want to highlight right now is Veongo Sokai, who is, I would say, matriarch of Malo. She is the mother of Lolofi Sokai, our executive director. And I think to that end, I want to share how much she has opened her heart and her home to the community, which we often say that that was the first resource center, was her house, where they would, both open their house to newly immigrated Tongan families and or would help families, file for immigration documents, for green cards. Back in the days when it was probably like not as expensive as it is now. But they were one of the families that for sure they were hallmark here in the Inland Empire. And it is no wonder that someone like Veongo not only has created that space, but also has now come into the classroom by way of not the workshops that she does with her daughter, Lolofi Sokai, in bringing really traditional knowledge, traditional understandings for our children to see what we know and know that it's knowledge too, and that it's important wisdom to pass on. So just to see that intergenerational connection right off top with those two is always powerful. The other woman I would say is Lolofi Sokai. What can I say more other than this woman has created a bridge, I would say, between not only elders and parents with the children, but with the institutions that are in the empire. And so to be sitting on certain committees, to be able to work with local schools, I think there is something really important about being able to code switch between those worlds and being able to really make it accessible to all of our elders, but then at the same time doing that for the children and the youth. So I think, again, the Yongo Sakai and the Lofi Sakai powerhouse, dynamic duo out here on being able to work within both of their courts has been just a blessing that I'm just so grateful to have known them and to be able to share a little bit about their work.
I wrote something on Naki and I put something together for Poly by Design's Facebook and Instagram page, and it had pictures of different women, Polynesian women or Pacific Islander women that have played roles in the community, different roles in the community, and then the words were kind of like, we celebrate women every day when we should be celebrating them every hour, every week, every month, but today's a special day, right? But as I was writing that, it really struck me with the Tongan community and how strong the role is of the woman in the culture, the role of the fahu. It just made me think like that's truly celebrating. They're not just talking it, or it's just in the practice and in the culture. So as I was writing that, I was actually thinking about the Tongan community and how strong the role of the woman is in Tongan culture. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. David, there's plenty left, but maybe not that you're working shoulder to shoulder with, because the recognition is strong with the ladies on here. But who comes to mind when we say that, we start talking about strong Pacific Islander women that you hold up or that you think are role models of sort?
It took all the good answers. But I mean, even on, I just did an Instagram post about like honoring especially the women on that I'm blessed enough to share space with in the Inland Empire Pacific Islander COVID-19 response team. That's Asena, Francine, Lulofi Soakai, Carla Thomas, Desiree Manuel, my sister Vaima Tautia. Like all of these women have really, I don't know, I'm in this space where I want to honor the people in my own backyard. I'm from Long Beach, so like I used to always say I'm not from the IE, but they make me proud to be, a member of this region, and just seeing their hard work, and it's just an honor to be working alongside all of them.
Awesome. And this can go out to any of the three for this, because this is going to be seen in across Pacifica, New Zealand, Samoa. For those that don't know what the Inland Empire is anybody want to take a shot at letting the rest of the world? Because we say IE, we know the difference between Long Beach, right, all the way out by the water, and then the IE or the Inland Empire. But anybody want to take a shot at defining what exactly the IE is?
So the Inland Empire is it's about 60 miles away from Los Angeles County. We're the largest county in California. Or I'm sorry, the Inland Empire is made up of Riverside and San Bernardino County. San Bernardino County is the largest county in California. We are on your way to Vegas, is how I describe it. We're majority of our region is rural areas, but there's where there are saturations of city life would be like San Bernardino, Fontana, going out into Victorville, and Riverside would be Riverside City, Moreno Valley, Cathedral City, close to Palm Springs. So we're the county that's like right in the middle, but easily forgotten.
Yeah, I think there's pieces of Southern California. When you say that, that would encompass entire states. If you laid out Southern California across the map back east, it would San Bernardino County would be bigger than some of the states. And then you have places like Yucaipa or Victorville, and people would think, oh, that's like LA, and it's completely different. So. And with as vast as that is, I guess that's a segue that will, kind of play into COVID-19. As vast as that is, and people don't think of rural areas when they think about California. They think about San Francisco, or they think about Los Angeles, or San Diego, San Jose, big, urban settings. And you've got you've got cities out there, like little ones like Beaumont, or, small rural areas. How do you reach? Not that, necessarily Pacific Islanders are in Beaumont, you know what I mean? But you don't know. So you've got to reach out, and you got to reach everybody. How do you cover that big of an area? Because it's so rural, I guess that's the difference than that and a lot of other California. And that's, let's start with Francine. So from the rural piece and the geography that needs to be covered, how have you gone about the outreach, I guess?
That's a really great question. When we first came together, we were like, how do we begin to do this? And we would even say, that's part of us too. Like, we would even be shocked as to what cities and smaller communities and rural communities that were actually part of just Riverside County, that was part of San Bernardino. So it's actually in responsive to our work of finding our fellow Pacific Islanders in the Inland Empire, we've learned a lot more about where we live. And I would say one of the places that I know Dave and I started with, just because we were trying to find locations of highly concentrated Pacific Islanders, is we looked at school districts. So we looked at numbers on the dashboard, on the data that we can receive based on numbers of Pacific Islanders. Of course, we looked at areas that our families are mostly at, or we look at churches, and we look at locations that we know our families go to. And then we had to just kind of keep taking a step back and saying, okay, wait, the data is so challenging because sometimes the data doesn't really truly give us the full numbers. So we would then be like, oh man, is that really the true thing to go off of? But one of the biggest places is looking at education, looking at where the kids are. If we can find out where the kids are, we find out where the families are. And as we know, I mean, not to say all the time, but a lot of our Pacific Islander families, when they're in an area like Moreno Valley, for instance, they may be spread out and sprinkled into different parts of Moval. We call it Moval. But they're like, when we look at the numbers, there's a like a concentrated area where there's a majority. So that was kind of what we were having to find in this huge region with multiple districts and multiple areas and a lot of rural areas that don't document our people's numbers even too. Like I think as a quick segue, but connected, Dave and I were shocked when we were looking at the data behind state testing, and we're like, it had a category for Pacific Islanders. It even said Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. We're like, oh, okay, so we got NHPI on there, but it didn't even have a number. Like often we found a 0. And so then as we did further research and we talked to superintendents or just people who look at data quite often, and I was talking to the director of data analysis in my own district, she was like, oh, Fran, if it's under a certain amount of percentage, the state won't even recognize that amount. So we're like, what? So sometimes there's a lot of pockets we have to find through story, through talking, through he said, she said, and really our families helped it. And a lot of our elders really pulled a lot of the locations where they found family members or churches that had a lot of our Pacific Islander churches within those churches. So that kind of gives you a frame of reference of some of the methods we use to find numbers. If you all want to add to this, feel free.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big piece of it is that there's a lot of multi-generational homes, right? So if you find the kids, you're going to find the parents, and you might find the great aunt or the grandparents or the great uncle or other pockets. It's almost like as you were talking about that, it reminds me of like mining for gold or something, or you know what I mean. And if you find a vein, you can just follow like, oh, this is where they live different places, but a lot of them go to this same school. Or then you get into the home and you find multi-generations. I wouldn't have thought about that. And I think I learned, and I'm sure that y'all were way into this before I was, but as soon as the numbers started coming out and you saw how bad the Pacific Islanders were being hit, the disaggregation of data, the value of it, I never understood it until COVID. And then it was like, wow, we got to have we need our numbers to know what's going on. So like I said, the community activists probably been on your radar for a long time. It was new to me. And now every time I see things, I'm like, oh, can we get that disaggregated? Can I see
Right.
our people within it? So that's a really great way of reaching out. How about you, David or Asena? Is there, it's kind of the same thing that you guys, like, how do we do it? How are we going to bite this off?
Yep, I would say we just ditto to what Francine said. We try to keep within, what we already know works. Like you connect with churches, you connect with, I would say within all of our different fields, we're always asking also the NHPI numbers, right? Whether we're in education or health, that's kind of just been, I think, the strength of our team is that we're always asking for those types of numbers. And so I think with us coming together and being able to like band together to say, hey, these are the pockets that we're finding, I think that's where we've been able to really grow and understand what also doesn't exist as part of resources for those areas. So
Awesome. David, is it coming from Long Beach and then being in the IE, did you see challenges there? I mean, you probably weren't there for COVID, I'm assuming, but did you see differences in just the way that everything's so vast in the IE?
Yeah, definitely. Like it's a lot slower pace out here. You get a small town feel, even I live in San Bernardino City. I feel like I live in a small town. But yeah, I think that was how the Youngstown was started, is coming from a place like Long Beach where there are these Pacific Islander groups and like organizations already established, to out here where we didn't see many people that look like us. That was a big reason why we started our organization.
Okay. We're into the vaccine now, right? But we wanted to get tested. We wanted to, as we've stepped through this, there's been different phases as we go about it. Is there a difference in the way that, like, has the infrastructure been laid to reach people now because we went through, the awareness and the education, and then get tested, and then, you know what I mean? Like we went through that. At this stage, is getting the education out for the vaccine just a whole new challenge, or is kind of has the groundwork been laid because we're, multi steps down the road? I guess we'll start backwards this time. David, do you see that as a whole new issue, or do you see it kind of, if you've done the work in the earlier phases, that you've kind of got the bandwidth now to reach people?
I think it's a whole new chapter for us. I think, and I've mentioned this in pretty much everywhere, that the vaccination information is not shared in a way that's digestible to the general population. It's often shared in a way that uses medical terminology that people don't typically know. And so I think we want to be intentional as a team in informing our communities and using language that they'll understand. But there's definitely still hesitancy, even among our team, about whether we're qualified and educated to encourage people to take the vaccine.
That's a really good point. That, are you qualified? So if you start talking about it and then you don't have answers to questions, and people start throwing questions at you, I've had that happen where, I'm talking about something and I'm trying to help with the education process, but my knowledge is fairly shallow with it. And if I get in-depth questions, I start wondering, like, do they think I don't know what I'm talking about, or is it putting the information in a bad light because I'm not like an expert level person, like I'm not an epidemiologist. So if they ask me a whole bunch of questions about the vaccine, eventually they're going to get to one that I probably don't have an answer for. Asena, do you worry about that when you're talking to people that hey, I can go get another answer. I don't know the answer, but I can go get it for you.
Yeah.
Do you concerned about that?
Yeah, I was just writing down a few notes because I think something that I know we're facing, at least when we're looking at our Tongan community, is language, making sure that the language is translated in a way that families can have conversations around it. I think that there's I would say, English speaking age where you can, digest this information quite easily, but then there's the relationship that we have with our elders, for example, to have that conversation. And I think the level of understanding that these vaccines are accessible to different communities, I think that's something that we're talking about, is like even just healthcare, knowing that they have spaces that they can go if they're undocumented. Those are real things for our community that we're having to, I would say, process it first before we take it out. I know that something that happened within our own IE COVID testing sites is that we wanted to make sure that if we gave out information, that we knew someone on the other end, or that we had gone through all the websites, that we had checked it out or processed it, as in went through it ourselves, because oftentimes this is our one goal with families, and we know how important it is for us to give information that we ourselves would want to hand to our own family members. We don't want anyone to get lost. 211, for example, is often referred to like call 211, but what does that really mean? Like, what does that mean to a family that has to do that on their own, and probably is the one working and taking care of the family and taking care of the kids? So those are things that we're always thinking about, like what is the follow through that people can actually process. And I think the other thing is just, we're trying to change behaviors around, understanding what, healthcare is, because, the thing that I hear a lot is like, vaccines are there, just go and get it. But, realistically, you're talking to a community that maybe has not had that regular care enough to say, hey, yeah, sure, stick my arm, it's like, that's a huge step, for some of our communities. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that we have trust enough built with them so that we can really convey the information, like David said, in terms that make sense to our community, and that we ourselves are okay using, because like I can go to someone with RNA but what does that mean? What does that
Right.
really mean to our families? So yeah, accessibility, healthcare access, and language.
I think English is my first language. I have a degree. My wife's got a degree in genetics from UC Davis. I don't understand, like, and with that, having English as my first language, having, higher education, and my wife actually a genetics degree, it's still like I still don't, a lot of people are thinking, well, then you must know, X, Y, and Z. And with that given, I still don't know, two or three questions deep, I'm like, I can't really carry that conversation on. Plus, you're right, there is a mistrust. There is a level of mistrust with, the establishment or the system, that's out there. So there's just extra things that need to be overcome with the PI community, and the work that you guys are doing. And I do want to talk specifically about our elders, but Fran, from the education standpoint, answering questions and those kind of things, is that in your mind? Is that an issue when you're doing that? Are you worried about getting questions you can't answer?
I think one of my biggest concerns was people asking the questions they really want to know. I think we tend to think we have to ask them in a certain way. And what I found in what David and Asena has said, that putting it in our language, but also too, just asking the most basic question, and really kind of like in a pandemic, we're moving so fast and things are shifting so fast that we were still having dialogue over testing, like we're still trying to get our families and our community to be tested. Now we're going into vaccines. So there was still some carried in confusion and sometimes hallucinations or stories or gossip, like all that reporting, as we call it, can really distort what is the actual reality. So I think I have learned it's really important for us to throw those out there. And in our team meeting, we've created recently like a list of questions. We have questions we've heard our family ask, questions, the most craziest questions even, and I think giving space and time, and Asena said that processing, for us to first address that, and then we can say to, okay, what health expert can address these, and also what health expert can address it in a way that our community will receive it, and in a way that they will be mindful of the way our community needs to receive it. So kind of learning that approach is really important. As my sister said, we got one time. And so when we do this, when we host some type of virtual setting, or when we have those one conversations, we have to really be intentional around our language. At the same time, we don't want to force it either. So we don't want it to be some type of like top down, we're telling you what to do. We want to just inform. And so staying in that space of informing, as well as educating, and then as well as like some are like just advocating for our health, so there's a lot of like underlining issues that I realized kind of as I came into this team, and my mindset was more education driven, like K through 12, like that's my brain, that's my area. I realized how much the health arena is similar to the education arena, and I didn't even know that. So as you mentioned earlier, as an educator who we think is informed, I'm not informed at anything on what these mean. Even like when they were talking about the different vaccines and Moderna and Pfizer, I was like, what is Pfizer? Like, I didn't even know how to say it. I didn't even know originally I'm just gonna put myself out there. I was like, what's PPE? What does it stand for? Like, and I would like talk to my team, and they inform me of those most simplistic questions. And I think that helped educate me in a new way, where I was able to take that to other family, where I'm not always in a health conscious conversation. I'm always in an educational perspective, so just personally, it's been huge for me to address what are my actual questions, and that of my people asking me. It's really important to address those initial basic idea questions.
And it's a great point. And I've said this, Naki and I have said this to every one of the groups, is how inspiring it was to see our community just come together once the numbers came out, once the numbers got disaggregated. I think that some of us suspected that the numbers were really bad, but we didn't have the data. So it was like this suspicion that things probably are pretty bad. And then when the numbers came out, it was like, oh my God, we got to do something right now. And to see, Fran, you talking about, I don't know what PPE was, but to see the entire community, just like people like, every head or every member of the regional teams, and just, we don't know what PPE is, but we know that our people are hurting, and to see everybody rally and galvanize and come together and just figure out, like, we don't know anything about this, but we know we got to help, and just roll up their sleeves and dive in. Seeing that, and then somehow, and Naki and I say this, somehow ending up being part of it and rubbing shoulders with people like you has been absolutely inspiring to see, is how fast our team came together and just said, we gotta do the work. We don't even actually know exactly what the work is, like, we're not experts, but we got to do it. And so to your point, Fran, that's
That's exactly what I was talking about, Carl. I was like, and I was going to say that to what David said earlier. We all somehow came together, and in coming together, it was like we all brought our different expertises to the table. So even though I will say this, David is phenomenal in health education, health awareness, and advocacy. And so I'm pulling from him and taking from him. And I'm realizing what different areas we need to bring together, and not be afraid to speak up for something that we've done in our own area of career and how that could apply here. So it's like we're taking all our expertises from our village and bringing it to the space to be a combined effort to really grow and support as a collective, and then move that work into the community. So there's a moment we were like, we didn't even know why I didn't even know why I was joining this team. I was kind of like, I just know it's needed. I know this is ridiculous, and I can't believe this, and I can't stand for this. I don't even care if this takes me away from this. I need to put work and time into this. And that's when I realized a lot of it had to come from a space of not just concern, but the doer work, because we can talk about it all day. We can address it all day. But if we don't do nothing with it, that it just
right.
becomes another talking session. And so this collective group, this family that we've created in the midst of all this, has really been an amazing model of doing, based on what we see in this data, based on what it's doing to us emotionally, in our careers and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, and like same when Dr. Samoa had talked to Naki and I, were like, "What do you want us to do? I mean, we'll do whatever we can to help, but I'm not sure what I'll do, but if you want help, I'll do whatever I can do to help." So yeah, that's just inspiring to see. Like, I'll figure it out on the way. I just got to act. I can't just talk. I got to act. David, I promise I didn't hang up on you. I don't remember where you're at, but I definitely want to let you weigh in on the top. And us talking about, not everybody's an epidemiologist, not everybody had the skills, but leadership translates, right? Like, we're all leaders of some sort. We know that we can get things done. We got to put our heads together and move on it. And I was just talking about how inspired I was by seeing the PI community coalesce and just unify and start getting things done that we may not even know, a whole lot about in terms of being our expertise, our specialty. But how did you, when you were getting involved, were you kind of the same way? Like, you hear people need help. Okay, I'm going to dive in, tell me what to do, and we'll just figure it out on the way. Or did you have a different idea when you were getting in?
I think it was definitely a humbling experience. I came in here kind of thinking I knew it all. And I was invited to the group through Asena and Lalofi, and just kind of taking a step back, because I do work in healthcare. I kind of was like, oh, I know this and I know that, but it was kind of just needing to slow my roll and like understand, like, okay, we're specifically dealing with the Pacific Islanders, like, and seeing what progress the team had made so far, and they've made some huge strides by the time I joined, and just going from there. But yeah, that's pretty much.
So let's at this point, what's important to the COVID-19 IE team, the response team in the IE right now? I'm assuming it's the vaccine, but in terms of, like, reaching our elders, is that the same way that we kind of this, and Fran hit it, like, is it that we try to get the information to the elders through the younger generation because they're intergenerational homes. Um, but what's important right now to the IE COVID-19 response team? Do you have sites? Is there information where people can go? And we said this last week with the Southern California, that's the name of the team, the Southern California team, was that site testing, absolutely, we need to get that out there. But if there's concepts that are important to your PI community in the IE, they're probably important to the PI community in Arkansas. So the concepts, a lot of the concepts are going to translate well. So the messaging that you want to get out there to the PI community in the Inland Empire, what does that look like right now? Are we focusing on test sites, or what's your priority? And that's just, I'll throw that out to anybody who wants to jump in.
I can jump in on it, and then for sure, Francine and David, please chime in. At least right now, to your first question about reaching our elders, I would say that is something that I think we're always thinking about across all of our programs. And I think knowing that each of our organization reaches, I would say, in a different way. I think we're adapting how we get this messaging out the way that it makes sense for each of our respective organizations and as messaging from the IEPI CRT. But in terms of what's important, I would say we're continuing to, well, let me take a step back. When we first, I would say, came together, it was really the census work that we actually did. And we were able to actually physically meet each other for the first time. And so I want to take it back there because I think that that told us that there was not enough, I would say, data and not enough clean data where we know, what's happening in education, what's happening in healthcare. We just know that there's all these fields that data impacts. So being able to do that census work together and then bringing that to the IEPI CRT, I would say that our work continues to be making sure that our data is NHPI disaggregated for each of our respective areas, I would say. And then like what Fran's talking about, some of the SARC data that is online on the websites, they're supposed to be complete, but what we found is that some of that data, it wasn't complete. We actually had to go to some of the superintendents to really ask, like, what does this data mean, and can they clean it up for us? I mean, those are steps that other communities don't have to do, and so I think those are things that we're recognizing as we're moving. And so to that end, I would say our scope vaccine is definitely a part of the conversation, but I think in general, we're trying to just, I would say that we're organizations, we care, we're out here, we are pulling for everyone, because again, much of our experiences, Carl, is that we're meeting some of these departments, and it's the first time that they're hearing about Pacific Islander anything. And so what we're finding is that our work is more than, as they say, the work is plenty. Workers are few right now, but our efforts are really to grow, I would say, capacity for our organizations to be able to do the work and be sustainable in the way that we do it. It's really broad, but Francine, David, please feel free to chime in.
I think Asena hit a lot of the main components that are concepts that are important. I think around COVID specifically, we've gotten in the conversation a lot about paperwork and the insurance, and down to the questions that are asked on the appointments. And I think one of the major big ideas I'm realizing is really communicating to our community that do not let the paperwork hold you back if you find that you want to get tested or you want to get vaccinated, because it's daunting. The questions can be, as many of us know, revealing of things that we feel that we're ashamed of, and we don't want people to feel that. We've asked many times, can you remove these questions? Why are these questions necessary? And the answer we get is because it's state mandated to ask these questions. And even though it doesn't take in consideration our community's history and experiences of immigration and experiences of just feeling a part of this nation alone, So I think that's really important, that we are valued, we are needed. We need to be documenting and entering our data as much as possible, and to not be afraid of this paperwork. And if you have questions, I know Epic's doing amazing things. People on our team are part of that in regards to helping people to understand what it means to make an appointment, what it means on those questionnaires. And I'm spending some time on that because even to the point of us talking about it as a team, we get those questions for ourselves, and I can't imagine we're meeting weekly and we're still we're very questionable about things. And so especially when it comes to insurance and identification and stuff like that. I also believe another major concept we're addressing is overall that Pacific Islanders are here to support you. As Asena said, we want to love on you and we want to help you in the areas of need. I mean, Malo and the Young Samoa take out food and to our families of need, especially when they're dealing with the COVID, in the midst of COVID, or because a family member has passed. And how do we support each other in that? And I think also too, redefining how we support in the midst of a pandemic. What does that look like? How can you do it safely and still true to who we are, right? And how do we engage in these traditional, beautiful ceremonies of honoring our ancestors, as well as honoring our graduates? And how do we do that at every level? How do we have a wedding? How do we still do these things and still respect of who we are, but do it safely? I think it's important to think outside the box and really consider those perspectives. Even as a team, we realized we had to model that at our testing sites, as simple as like hugging each other. Like when I saw David and Asena and the rest of our team members, the first thing I want to do is hug them. Like, we've been doing so much work together. I want to give them that love. And I'm like, like, let me, just a simple piece like that. So the concept of how do we stay true to who we are and still go through these processes within a pandemic setting, right? And honoring that and valuing that. And then the other part that I've realized, a big concept, and Asena hit this, is overall education of who we are to our entire community of Inland Empire, consistently speaking to our needs, consistently speaking to the needs, not just of health concerns, but who we are. Like, we're made up of Polynesian, Micronesian, and Melanesian, like even not redefining, but defining that, going to the point of explaining that. And I know, as many of my fellow brothers and sisters of the island community, we constantly have to define our identity, right? So it's teaching people also in the midst of this time who we are, what we are, how we move, and we're not one stop shop, so don't try to like learn us in 1 minute. And then the other thing too, and David, I know you want to touch on this too, is the importance of cross-cultural support. The Black community has been an amazing support for our community, and in the community of San Bernardino and Riverside, we come together in a lot of spaces. And our Black brothers and sisters have been a part of our initial testing site, from Pastor Casey to opening up his church to our other location that was in Paris. And so we consistently see the need to cross-reference our brothers and sisters of different cultural areas and different cultural needs, and really making sure that when we advocate for our work, we share who's part of that partnership. And I think that's always an important piece to moving our groups collectively, and speaking for not just cultural, even our LGBTQ community, even our communities of that I'm just now learning are our special needs communities, and not forgetting those, our disabled communities. And another thing, I'm just going to say this for me, our youth. One of the things that I learned is, in our group alone, we have young adults that are doing amazing work. And it doesn't have to be defined by how many years I've been in a career. It is defined by their pure passion and purpose and intent to do that work. And so there's people that are doing this work that are not of an age you would think And I think we can't assume that. So one of the concepts I really want to hit too is like, we got to be mindful as older people, elders, or, you know, I don't want to call myself an elder. I'm not an elder yet, you know, even though some, I'm confused who to call auntie and who not, but really just saying our young adults can teach us, and it could come from them just as much as it can come from us. So
Definitely. I think that the role models goes both ways. Like I see the younger generation, I see them doing things and I'm like, wow, that inspires me that there's time in my day that I could be doing something else or doing more besides watching Netflix or something. So the modeling can come from, it doesn't, it's not always an age thing. We always think that the elders are always going to be the role models. I see plenty of our young, and I think they get too much heat. I think they get too much, the kids these days are, the worst generation. And then when I see, 18 and 19-year-olds showing up to community programs on Friday night. Like when I was 18 and 19, I was trying to figure out which club do I, what's the coolest place that I can be. I was not trying to do some of the things that I see kids doing nowadays, and they don't get the recognition. And I love the program that you have, that we're the graduation program. Those things are so important. So one thing that you would think after 19 shows I would have learned is do not ask a question and throw it out to a group of Pacific Islanders, because everybody's humble. So every time I do this and there's this long moment of silence, I go, oh yeah, that's right. I'm not supposed to do that. I got to stop doing that. So David, how about you? I'll start calling people by name because I've done that before, and then I don't want to say anything because I've asked the question, I've thrown it out there, and there's been like long periods of silence. I know it's the humility in our that's just inbred in us, where people are like, no, I'll go second or I'll go third. So I will learn that again. I learned that today. David, how about you?
I like Francine kind of touched on. I do just really want to intentionally call out Pastor Wade Ford, who was the pastor of the Lake Paris Church, where we were able to host our testing site back in December. Pastor Samuel Casey, who's pastor that hosted our testing site in Fontana. Just the solidarity and the support from the Black community. Our successes due in large part to that solidarity. And I think as a COVID team and just as a PI coalition beyond COVID, I would hope that we could build PI community infrastructure out here the way it is in a lot of different areas. And to really one day be able, if the Black community ever called on us for support, that we could in turn offer that same solidarity that they've been so generous with for us. That's really what I intentionally wanted to mention.
I think that's a great call out. And Naki and I have said this many times on our shows. All people of color should be very sensitive to what the Black community is pushing, because all minorities ride pretty much on the backs of where the Black community pushes, right? So the Civil Rights Act, like that was pushed by Black activists, but all people of color benefited from that. So, and you're so right that communities of color need to recognize that we're strong together. We're strong as a unit. We don't need to be quibbling among ourselves and trying to divide between groups. And I always think about that when I see like BLM or protests and those kind of things, and it's a quote Black event. I look at it and I'm like, that's all people of color. Like those are going to be benefits that they will achieve. We're all going to realize. So that's a great point to bring up. That there are allies, and there are groups that we achieve the same things together. So great point. So I was listening to a podcast, and it was talking about, because COVID was so quickly in terms of a vaccine, that it was a unified effort. There was funding put to it. There were some companies that shared information with other companies, private companies, that they probably wouldn't have if it hadn't have been, a pandemic and a unified effort. And because things came together so quickly, the podcast was talking about the medical community, the research community is hoping that this can be a template going forward for things like cancer or other things where the research can be more of a unified effort, and it could change the way that medicine is created and illness and disease are addressed. In that sense, with the Pacific Islander community, because we galvanized and we came together and we've been so unified in this effort to fight COVID-19, do you feel like the infrastructure has been laid now that if something else were to come down the line in a year from now, that we would have the infrastructure in place to get training and education and information quickly to our people? Or do you think this kind of falls apart is kind of a bad term to use, but once the threat of COVID goes away, do you think that some of the progress that we've made as a community will fade, or do you think we kind of hold on to that? And it's kind of an opinion thing. So I'm going to call out a name, Asena. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the question because I think there's I don't know, because I do feel like our experiences in the Inland Empire has been one that has been really colored by the fact that we have very few PI orgs, very few PI like anything really. A lot of what we experience in trying to just host like a testing site, which to David and Francine's point, we had to really connect with our partners, and really, like Francine being very humble as she is connected us to Samuel Casey. So I think it's understanding that if we are looking to bring information down, I think it's being able to recognize that much of the work that has been done has been on, I would say, labor that hasn't been really compensated. I think a lot of what we found is like we're doing this all from hard work, but realistically, is that sustainable? Is that going to be realistic? And I'll just give the example of the fact that many of us were coming together and meeting in the Inland Empire as a team, but then having to have several different pieces of, I would say, time throughout our weeks to really sit and talk with the Department of Public Health, for example, and recognizing that like out here we have San Bernardino County, then we have to come back and talk with Riverside County, right? So there's these nuances that are existing out here that I think we're oftentimes having to make sure that we do this not once but twice, and also recognizing that both of these counties don't really function similarly. Like, for example, the testing site we did in San Bernardino, they were able to help us and support us, but they weren't able to fund us to do certain pieces of that work. Riverside was different because we were able to be funded and we were able to hire and really get more infrastructure in place. But realistically, had it not been for those types of funding supports, I think our work would have been much harder to really get some of the information, developing the information, and actually making sure that we're able to reach. So I think there's multiple, I would say, facets that our team, I think a very talented, gifted group has been able to work with $1 and make it look like $1,000,000. I would say really make, being resourceful about what we have out here. But I just have to note that because these nuances here, I don't feel like we talk about it enough. So there's some labor that we're never mentioning that everyone on the team is aware of. But I just wanted to highlight that for everyone. There's information coming out. We have 2 whole counties that we're dealing with pushing it out.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's kind of like a 2-minute offense, right? You can't run a 2-minute offense the entire game. So I get what you're saying. Fran, how about you? Do you think this is, we can learn from this and hold on to some of the I guess the bandwidth that we have, or is it more of like a 2-minute offense that now we know how to do it? So if something comes up again, we know what rallying to action looks like.
Yeah, I think really everything that Senna said covered a lot of what you're asking. And I think a little bit of even what David mentioned about the infrastructure of what we are going to be, or what we are as a coalition, how we move forward in supporting our own organizations and our collective approach in an area that we typically don't see a lot of Pacific Islander organization. We have not seen historically organizations last and come together and support each other in that way. I'm as I work in education, I feel like I'm constantly having to prove the need for the work that we do. And I feel like having this pandemic of COVID-19 show the need for our people to be seen and to do something about it has definitely lit the fire, has made people want to find out who we are, has made people interested. And I hate to say this, but at the sake of like making sure they're doing something about saying we're meeting the Pacific Islander needs is like, okay, for right now, it's a hot topic. And I feel that what's going to keep our community a community that is brought up and that is consistently thought of. And I think and I try not to speak in a negative light. I try to speak more like positively in regards to, my hope is that because of this, people are now educated and aware of our community, and now will consider thinking of our community, and now we're speaking to it. So when we come to spaces, people can see us speak to that, or an extension of us can see that, oh, we need to make sure we're bringing this in. And an example of that is even just my close friends who are administrators, and knowing that I'm Pacific Islander, anytime they have a Pacific Islander family, they're like, hey, Fran, can you do something for my community? Like, hey, can you? And so that has been a bridge. And I respect all those steps to get there. So I hope and I pray that we can have that longevity with the intent to really, truly meet our community's needs after this pandemic, beyond this pandemic, in response to this pandemic, and even in like mental health and the behavioral health component, right? So yeah, I mean, I hope that answers your question, Carl.
No, it does. It's about staying power, right? Like, do we hold on to, the government, the state government, the city government? Do we hold on to their attention, or do we lose all the ground that we've gained? I mean, I think that's a legit question. Is do we continue to hold their attention and get data disaggregated and all the things that you all have worked so hard to get? Do we stay on their radar? I think that's
You know
a great
what?
question.
You made me think about something, Carl, that we've been really intentional about. And this comes from amazing experiences and leadership of being in these situations. We have had Sefa and just Lolofi and Vi and everybody, Des and Carla, contribute to an understanding that how do we use our resources that we're getting now to create longevity with them? So we're trying to be very intentional with whatever resources, funding that we're getting now. How do we keep that a part of something that's going to support and further us? And Asena is great at this. She's always saying, okay, y'all, how do we keep loving on ourselves? How do we do this without losing that whole metaphor of pouring out the cup so much that we have nothing left for ourselves, right? So I think that's a very strategic like wisdom that we have in our group that I'm so grateful for, because part of us is like, okay, use it all. Let's put it into our families. Let's get people hired. But it's like, no, let's be strategic. Let's think intentionally and slowly and thoroughly. So that's been really helpful.
Yeah, intentional strategy, long term. Those are, those will last. That's great thoughts. David, I think you're cleanup on this on this topic.
Yeah, I think this is work that needs to continue beyond COVID. I think we need to recognize the intersections that, I don't know, just in trying to get our data, and as someone who's been trying for years to get better NHPI supporting resources in regards to HIV prevention and education. At the state level, we're still aggregated into an API population. And so just in seeing, how we've been able to disaggregate NHPI data for COVID, and that unmasking that, we are high risk, particularly in our area. That is something that I do bring up, in committee meetings at the state level. Even Francine, like reviewing that data, seeing that there is this disparity in NHPI testing that's just not accounted for. We're meeting about COVID with, the superintendents and people at the state, but we're also, pointing out these disparities. And so understanding that there's these intersections and that we can call them out, and, that is the work, that is carrying on the work beyond just COVID to me.
Awesome. So a great discussion. I was a little slow getting us started, so we're a little bit past 6, but any last shot, actually any last where people can get information? I know that there's the Facebook page, websites, any of those kind of things where people in the IE can go to get information about vaccination test sites, vaccination sites, any information you want to get out there in terms of resources. Oh, I didn't call a name. Asena.
I was just about to pull it up. Well, I think our IEPICRT, we don't have a website, but we do have an Instagram that we push out all of our information. It's IE Oceania Connects on Instagram. And then each of our respective orgs, I can share that at least Malo has Facebook as well as a website, malotongaie.org. But for the most part, anything that comes through IE Oceania Connects, we are pushing it out through each of our Facebooks and Instagram. But please, Francine and David, feel free to drop your Instagram handles.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think we're definitely, as David was mentioning, the infrastructure is still developing, so creating our own site would be beneficial as soon as we make that space and time to do that. And for Island Grad right now, we're actually officially becoming a nonprofit. So I've been doing it for 4 years now with the fiscal sponsors of Black Grad. So now it's becoming its own nonprofit. So it's in the midst of having its own website again. But you can find Island Grad on Facebook and Instagram, Island Grad. And again, supporting our COVID response team with all the resources that we can. I think Asena answered already.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Fran. David, any resources or any information you want to get out there?
Yeah, I would say if you want to reach the Inland Empire Pacific Islander COVID-19 response team directly, you can email us at iepicovidteam@gmail.com. We also have a phone number. It is 909-353-7445. If you need any type of support, just reach out, and one of us is manning the lines and can connect you to either one of our orgs that are provide you those resources.
Thank you so much. The hour flew by. We'll have to come back to the IE again. I'm learning it can be San Bernardino or San Bernardino, Moval, the Ville, all the short, the abbreviated names in the Inland Empire. It was awesome to have everybody. I love seeing kids in the background, hearing kids in the background. Very, very Pacific Islander. And that's the way it should be, right? That's how we're doing it. It's heart work. So I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. We will be back next Monday with a different regional team. I'm not sure where, but come back and Koviki Talk with us next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me.